Let's go ahead and begin. So, welcome. This is lesson 1 of the Blender tutorials with sound this time. And we're going to go through how to get Blender on your PC or Mac and some basics of 3D modeling, some lighting, stuff like that. And so first of all, to get Blender, you go to this website, blender.org, and download the latest version for your either PC or Mac. So whenever you click download, it'll take you, to another page where you install it to the right version of computer you're using. And they have some cool things on here on their site, some resources, some different versions of Blender, including they have some experimental versions that have some things you can mess with that are quite fun, but most people are just going to go with the latest one, and right now we're at like 2.93. So first you download it here, and after it's done downloading and you open it up, the first thing you'll see is, let's switch the stream over. Okay, first thing you'll be greeted to is this screen with 1,000,001 buttons and 20,000 things to do. But most of the time, whenever you see this little box here, this is just setting up your file so that you can work on a specific thing. Most of the time, you'll just be using a general file, but you can also do things like 2D animation work, sculpting, VFX. You can do all of those things through general, but this goes ahead and opens up the specific screen that you might want to use for it. But I'm just going to use general for this. And you're greeted by this huge viewport display right here. And this is your 3D world that you can move around. You can add stuff to, change your scene up, and you see everything through here. And it always loads you up with a basic cube, a light up here, and your camera. And from this viewport, you can set up your scene any way you need it to. But usually you'll just be deleting these right off the bat, but I'll leave them for now. Up here at the top left, you have your basic file options. So to save, edit, render. So you've got your file, your edit. This is where you'll be rendering and changing windows, and they also have some nice manuals and tutorials up here through Blender themselves and any support you might need. Next to that, you've got your different mode options here. So you can switch from your layout mode, which is your basic viewport display, where you move things around and set up your scene, over to something like specifically just for modeling, so it changes up some of the tabs. Your sculpting, UV editing, which we'll be getting into later, but this mainly has to do with making sure your textures don't stretch around your object and they're set up correctly. Texture painting, so if you want to make your own textures. We've got the shading tab, and this is where you can add textures and materials to objects and see how they look under lights, and also work on nodes, which we'll also be getting into. Animation, so this is basically, all of these are basically just changing around these tabs here for different workflows. Your rendering and your compositing. And scripting as well, because in Blender you can model through code. So you can type Python code and it'll affect your scene. I don't use it that often. I feel like most people don't use it that often, but it is helpful if you're trying to do something very, very specific with your scene. But most of the time you'll just spend in the layout tab. Under that, you've got some other options for your main tab. And these options up here are pretty much the same for each tab you go to, but I can switch between different modes. So I can go from this being the viewport display to being the outliner that tells me everything I've got in my scene, which is also over here. But you can change any of these around however you need them to. You can stretch the screen over, whatever works best for your workflow. I usually leave it about like this, and then I'll drag this up and change this one to whatever I want it to be, like the shader editor or whatever else. Under those settings, you've got what your object mode is in. So, for example, if I click on this cube here and I pull that drop down, it'll give me different options for what I can do to that mesh. So I can either take it into editing mode, and from here I get a different set of tools that I can do, or that I can use, and I can affect the individual points, the vertices of the mesh, and move those around in this mode. And I can also do things like cut the mesh in half, or add different effects to it and make it how I want it. I'm going to set that back to normal for now. Sculpting mode gives you a whole nother set of tools here. And this is obviously for sculpting. And you'll be using this if you're wanting to make 3D character models. And it's a good method, especially if you have like a drawing tablet or some sort of Wacom pad. But I will go ahead and say with a mouse, sculpting is very difficult. And then you've got other things like painting, messing with your textures, but we'll get over those last three later. And then you can also, from this set of tools up here, you can change where your view is. You can select certain objects or groups. This is also where you'll add objects to your scene or meshes to your scene. So, if I wanted to add in a sphere, right now it's inside the box, but I'll pull that out of there. That's how I would add objects to the screen. And it's also where I can affect objects by transforming it, setting mirrors, and shading objects smooth. A lot of Blender, you'll find out, is basically multiple buttons that do the same thing and all get the same effect. And it's just a lot of figuring out the best way for your workflow, where to go through and do it. All right, and over here you've got some other tools for viewing your scene. So sometimes you want to view your model without all these lines everywhere, and you can come through and click something like the Show Overlays button, and it'll take all that away so you can view it just as is. If you turn it back on, it'll bring all those lines back. This is also where you can change your viewport mode. So right now we're in solid mode, so it just has the solid gray objects, and the lighting is very basic and is just for your modeling and getting your scene set up. If you want to take it one step under that, you can click right here and go into your wireframe mode, and this will show you the individual lines that connect your meshes together. And if I go back into solid mode, we've got our object again. And then if I want to take it into another one, the one next to that is the shading mode. So it gives it some more basic lights and will let you see the colors that you put on it. So if I wanted to make it red, it would let me see what it looks like under certain lighting. And then the last one is your rendered mode. So this will show you what it'll look like when it comes out of the machine. So right now, the only lighting that's on it is this light up here that we have in our scene. So, if I power that up, get more light on it, less light, but it shows us what it'll actually look like. One step above this would be using rendered mode and then also turning off your overlays up here, and then you actually get to see what's going to come out of your machine. And I'll just leave it in rendered mode right now, since we don't have anything too complicated going on. Then on the side of your viewport display over here, these are all your tools. So if I click on an object and I click on move, it'll open up these arrows. And each of these arrows will move the object on a single plane. So if I wanted to move it left and right here across the Y plane, then I just drag the green arrow. Or if I wanted to move it across the X plane, I just drag the red arrow. And same for the Z axis, drag the blue arrow. And those color combinations are the same for each of the tools. And that just is a little help, a guide to let you know what direction you're moving the object in. Let's put that back. Underneath move, you've got your rotate tool. And you see it's the same 3 colors, so I can either rotate it on the X axis, I can rotate it on the Y, and the Z. Then, after that, we've got the scale tool, and that's exactly what it says it is. You scale it, so I can either scale it on the Y, make it taller. I can scale it on the Z, scale it on the Y, make it move out that way, or I can scale it right here with the X-axis, or I can just take the white line that surrounds it, and it'll scale the whole thing equally. So it'll maintain its shape. And then under that is your transform tool. I don't use it that often, but it basically just turns on all the tools at once. So you just have to be very specific on which one you grab. Other than that, up here at the top, you've got your selection box. So in this mode, it's just for selecting things. So I can hover over, select everything like that. I can just select specific things, or I can just click them. And then this cursor mode, or this cursor tool, that determines where in your scene objects will come in. So right now, and the default is it'll always be in the center of your world. But if I wanted to say put it over here, it moves it over there, and if I go back into selection, and if I add in a new object, it'll place it wherever that cursor is. And if I want to reset the cursor, I can't just click undo. I actually have to go in and hold down Shift and then click S. And then if I hover over cursor to world origin, or if I click 1, it'll reset it to the center of the world. That has messed me up a few times because I will lose track of where I put the cursor and add in items or add in objects, and I won't know where the heck they are or why they are all the way over here. But it's just a good thing to remember. Most of the time you'll keep it in the world origin, but sometimes it's good to move it around if you're making a really complicated scene, or you just want to add in a specific object in a specific place. And then you've got your other tools down here. Annotating, measuring. This will add a basic cube in, and these two down here are add-ons, so don't worry about these two. But these tools change depending on what mode you're in. So if I'm in edit mode, well, I have a whole new set of tools down here that I can mess with, where I can extrude a vertices or a point. And also from edit mode, this is where you can go in and you don't have to select specific vertices. You can select specific lines or an entire face of an object. And with the extrude tool, you can pull it up, make it longer that way, but it adds in new points along the way. And these tools are what you would mainly be using for hard surface modeling, like robotics, or making a cool sci-fi scene that has really hard edges. You'll spend most of your time in edit mode and your regular object mode.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I still hear myself double because I'm listening to you on the computer. Wait, I will mute my computer. So when you put it longer, because I have done this first lesson also by myself. When you make it longer, you add on new points, right? Like you can do it without editing new points, and you can even put more new points on it, right?
Yeah. So if I stay in object mode like this, and I just click on scale, I can make it longer. And if I go back into edit mode, you'll see there's no new points have been added. It just lengthened it. But if I make new points in this mode with the extrude button, it'll add in a new line across the edges right here. So it gives you control.
And before you did it with the one above it, before you made it longer with the, with the tool above the one you're using now, right?
Yes, but you can, if I go in and use the same move, rotate, and scale tools here, I can select everything by clicking A, and I can do it that way as well. And it won't add in.
Oh yeah, get it.
But also in this mode, you can, if I select just this top face, I can move it specifically and make skewed objects. And then if I was to go in and extrude this right here and do it again, then I could go in and move this direction and up. And that's how you get like your hard surface modeling, how you go in and make these complicated things. And scale also works in this mode for just a singular face. So I could scale this all the way down and get a point. Or, because that still has 4 points there, if I wanted to, I could right click and it gives us another little list of settings here. And I could, let's see. Or I could go up here actually. Face. I can change it from these settings up here and right here and do specific things to just that face. Like if I wanted to go into mesh and merge at center, that'll make it a perfect point.
Got it.
But I'm going to delete this object and I'm just going to add in a new cube. And then after that, let's see, you've got your other tabs over here. So this is your outliner. This basically just shows you everything in your scene, and I can select things from here as well. Now, it's very important the more objects you add to your scene to name these, because if I add in 13 cubes, well, it's just going to say cube 1 through 13. And it's not going to tell me which one is specifically that object. So if I wanted to, I could go in and double click and rename this whatever I want. This can be Bob. But from here I can also select like my light, my camera, anything in my scene I can select from here. And you can also separate things into different collections and make categories and subcategories of what's in your scene. Under this is one of the more important tabs that you can use. This is where, say if I click on this cube, I can change all of these things from here. So if I wanted to scale it out on the y-axis, I could. And I could get a very specific number, so I can click on it and I'll reset it back to 1. So it's a perfect cube again. I can also rotate from here and change location.
I don't want to interrupt you, but did you know that I don't hear you double anymore? So I don't know if you stopped recording or...
No, I server deafened you, so it didn't show up in 2 places. I did it through the Discord server.
I get it, yeah.
But also from this mode, I can go in and change this object's relation to another object. I can change all the different collections I've got, my instancing, how it appears on the viewport display, all of these options. And then from here I can also add in different modifiers, like a subdivision surface modifier, really make that cube look wonky. I can add in things like physics from right here. After that, you've got your particles tab. This is, say you wanted your object to have hair and you needed a quick way to add in some particles. You could go click on the object and go to the particles settings and add, let's just add in some hair. Now, depending on the shape of your object, it could or could not look very wonky, and you still have to do a lot of editing after that. But it goes ahead and adds those particles in. I'm just going to get rid of those for now. After that, these are your physics settings. So say I wanted this to be a liquid that pours down. Well, I can turn it into a fluid here. And I'll be going over simulations more in another lesson. But just going over where these tabs are. Your object constraints, so whether or not it can move in certain directions, it can go through certain things, adding in a skeleton. So if this was a character model and you wanted to make a skeleton form so you could animate, this is where you would go about that. And the rest of these are for your materials and textures. So I'm going to go over materials next. Once you click on an object, there are two ways that you can add a material to it and edit it. You can either come over here to this tab, this little material properties tab, and click new, and it gives you a very basic list of things that you can change. Like I can change the base color of the object. Let's make it like a pink or magenta. I can change the subsurface scattering. So subsurface scattering would be like what happens whenever light passes through your finger and you see that little reddish glow. It's allowing some of the light to pass through the object and scatter inside of it. Turn that off for now. Or, I'll leave it on. After that, you've got stuff like metallic, so you can make the object more metallic. You can change how specular it is, which is how much light reflects off the object. And you can change like your roughness. So if I wanted to get a really perfect shiny metal, I would turn the roughness and the metallic all the way up. Here, let's see. I'm going to move that light a little bit closer so you can really see it. You can see the reflection of the light on there. And all these other settings do different effects and affect the way either light hits it or color comes across on the object. And, it's things like your alpha, you can turn that all the way off and you basically just get a black object. But if you want more control over your materials and your textures, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. I can pull this little tab up, make sure this is on Shader Editor, and this is where you can do things like add in nodes, which are a way of controlling the material of your object or certain parts of your object. So I can click off of the object now because this is already affecting the cube. But you see you get the same menu you get up here, except you get to plug things into it. So let's change the color again to something like a blue. And let's move this light over some more. All right, and say I wanted to add some cool effects to it. Well, I can come over here and click Add, and I've got all these neat little boxes that I can add into this material that'll change the way it looks, like a noise texture. So if I was just to grab this and plug the factor into my base color, I get an effect like this, or I can also plug in the color to the base color, and it's almost like a random noise texture. But if I want more control over this, I just add in more boxes. So say I wanted to add in a color ramp in there, I can pull these two colors that it gives off closer together and get a more defined edge on that noise texture. And I can also mess with the settings within each one. So I can turn the detail up, turn the roughness up if I want, and I can also change the scale. Set it back to 1 for now, and distortion's fun to mess with. But this screen, this node editor, is how you're going to make most materials in Blender. Also, with the color ramp, I can change the color of each box. Now, say I wanted to make this have more of a rock texture. Well, I could come in, delete that, and I can add in an image texture. And I can connect that here. And if I open this up and select a JPEG off my computer, I can make it have image textures that I can use to maybe give the illusion that it's made of rock, or give the illusion that it's a background like clouds flying around. Here, I'm going to add in a image texture that I downloaded recently. Let's see. Click add. I'm gonna add the one that says color. So right now that looks pretty crappy, because all we are putting on is the color from the image. And it might not be the right scale. So if I come in here and I hold down Control and T while selecting the image texture, I can add in this mapping node, and that way I can change the size of the image. So say I wanted it to stretch across more and stuff like that, I can change that from here. I'm going to pull this up a little bit more so y'all can see better. There you go. Now, to get it more like a rock, like I want it to, I'm going to add in some more of these image textures. So if I go in, I click duplicate, I can add in more of these. I'm just going to add in 4 for now. And I can just use the same mapping location for each of them so they can all be the right size. All right, and whenever you download an image texture, it'll usually send you 4 or 5 different files for different types of texturing. Usually it'll have one for the actual color, it'll have one for how rough the object should be, it'll have another that tells you where the normal should be, and it'll all come in one package. But so right now I'm going to go ahead and add in the roughness image and change this little color space down here from RGB over to non-color, because I'm not worried about it affecting the color of the object. I'm just worried about it telling it how rough it needs to be. And this also saves on storage for the mesh you're working on, or the object. So I can move this color and plug this over into roughness, and it'll change how rough the object is in certain locations. All right, and this one, I'm going to go ahead and make this one our normal. Change that over to non-color, and I'll make this one the displacement image. And it'll tell you which one it is whenever you download it. It should say it next to the, or in the name of the file. But because this is our normal and our displacement textures, we need to add in one more thing to actually get it to change the shape of the object. Well, first we need to come in and add in more vertices, because if it's going to affect the bumpiness or the shape of our object, right now it's only able to work off of these vertices here. So if I go back into my edit mode up here at the top and I click A to select everything, I can easily do that by right clicking and subdivide, and then this little drop down will pop up, and from here I can add in more or less subdivisions. With this object, I can add up to 10 subdivisions, and these are just more vertical or vertices and points for it to affect. If I wanted to, I could select everything and do it again and get an even smaller set of vertices or set of subdivisions. And I can take it back into our object mode, pull this back up, and now we just need to add in one more node, and that is going to be a bump node. And that does exactly what it says. It'll bump the object in certain locations based on the textures you put in. So if I put the normal color into the normal, and I put the displacement color into the height, now if I connect this to our normal, it should change the shape of our object. Now from here, this is only a 2K texture, so you're gonna see some pixels on this one, but I can change other things too, like how metallic it is. I can turn that down, and I don't need this to be too specular because it's just a rock. And I can also go in and change, our sheen is already at 0, so I think I'm gonna leave it as is. But if I wanted to change the size of our rock texture, and this usually works better on a sphere, I just was running it off this cube here, I can change it to something like 5 on our X and 5 on our Y, make it a little bit smaller. And you can get some pretty cool effects using image textures. And our lighting is also terrible, so let's set that back to what it normally should be. And depending on the size of your image texture and also how you use it in your scene, you can make some pretty believable rocks. Now you see right here, it's not actually affecting the displacement on it. It's just affecting this sort of bump effect. But if I want it to affect the displacement, I can go over here to this tab, scroll all the way down to, let's find
Sorry
it.
to interrupt. Is the stream supposed to be getting the audio as well, or is it just Clubhouse now?
It's just
coming through.
Oh, it's just Clubhouse. I haven't been running it on the stream, have I?
Oh, it was earlier. I just wondered if that was meant to be turned off.
Oh yeah, I meant to turn it off. I didn't know.
Yep, cool. Yep, just checking, cool.
Yeah. But yeah, so I just thought it'd be easier to run it through here. But in this mode, you actually can't change it because I'm in Eevee render engine. But I guess I'll go ahead and go over the different render engines while we're looking at this. So these top few tabs here, these affect the world and also your final render. So if I want, I can change the color of the world and different effects on the world from right here. I can also edit that the same way I would an object by clicking down here on our shader editor and setting it to world. And I can affect the way the world looks as well. but I'm just going to do it from here right now. I'm going to set this to a black background. And above that, this is where you can change certain things about your scene, like your gravity, any audio, rigid bodies, stuff like that. We'll be getting into that later as well when we work on animations. These are where you can set different things that will show up in compositing. So if I want to edit later what the shadows do, I can turn on shadows and it'll show up in compositing as something I can use. Above that, you can set the resolution of your camera, which our camera should be right here. Now to see out of your camera, to see what your camera sees, you can just click 0 on your number pad and it'll put you in the eye of your camera, so to speak. But you can also go in here and change the way your file is exported, whether or not you want it to be a PNG, an MP4, a JPEG, all of these different, an AVI, or AVI. And then above that, this is your render settings. So the native render engine for Blender is Eevee, and that's this real-time render engine. It works pretty good, but it is not the best when it comes to light. So you see right here, the light's shining over and it's clipping off right before it gets to the back of the object. It's good for some things, but the best one on here for light that's natively installed is Cycles. And that uses your GPU to render, or your CPU, but I usually switch it over to GPU compute. Just depends on which one is better for your computer. And then if I wanted to make my light a bit bigger real quick, and I'm going to up the power of the light. You see it handles light a lot better. But this is also where you can go in and you can add in denoising, so your image will look a lot clearer afterwards. You can change performance settings, all of these settings that can add something to your artwork. But in Cycles mode, I can actually do new things to the material. So if I click on the object again, I go back to that material tab, I scroll down, you see I have a new setting called displacement. And also in our settings tab, you see there's other things for displacement down here. Now this allows us to do not just our bump node that makes it look like it's rough, but I can also go in and change it to displace and bump. And it's probably because I'm using a cube, but on a sphere, this makes the actual mesh itself change shape. So you actually get the edges to appear more rock-like. So you could make things like a cave wall or maybe an actual rock out of your sphere, and you can change the vertices of it. If I come in here, I can add in a subdivision surface. Let's see. And I can at least get some more rounded edges on it. Not going to worry about turning it into a sphere right now. But that is the basics of adding models to your scene, changing some of the materials, and also what all of these random buttons and tabs do. And next time we get in, I'll go more in depth with materials and also the lighting that can be used in a scene.